I think it's good whenever you get like a really good IA to want to like pass that on and like become an IA yourself and be like a good IA. And I always tell my kids like at the end of the semester, like, hey, like, we're always hiring. If you want to teach, like, here's the link or whatever. And I've had like several of my kids become IAs in like subsequent semesters.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think I do like a decent job and like inspiring people to want to teach as well. Um, but I think that's what it was. I think I had a really good OCHM 1 IA, and it made me kind of want to um, like share that experience with other people.
Hi, Chandler. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We kind of brought you here because you're a very experienced lab IA at Texas State. Uh, what else do we want to know about you?
Well, so I'm a senior in the chemistry program at Texas State. Um, I've been lab IAing for like 2 years now. So it's a pretty fun thing. Um, I think I'm pretty good at it. I recently started working in like the chemistry stockroom, so just kind of like I'm all around the chemistry department, kind of. Um, I'm also researching with the Hudnall group. Um, so it's really nice because this year and last year I kind of like never really leave the chemistry building. That's where like all my classes are and all my like, research and my job. It's all just in one building, so it's really nice. I'm kind of just all over the department for the most part. Um, yeah, that's kind of everything I do
Mm.
as far as like chemistry is concerned.
What are you an IA for right now?
Right now, I'm in my like fourth semester or fifth semester of OCHM 2. I started with OCHM 1 for a semester or two, and then I moved to OCHM 2, and I've stayed since.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Which one do you like more?
I like OCHM 2 a little bit better,
Yeah.
just because the students are a little bit more. I don't know. It's really the labs, because OCHM
Hmm.
1, I feel like it's a lot of just teaching you like how to do things, and then OCHM 2, it's like use those things to like do chemistry. Like
You
it's a
put it
lot
all
more.
together.
Yeah, it's a lot more reactions. It's a lot more like synthesis instead of just like this is how a distillation works. Like
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. The OChem 2 lab was kind of moved online for me. So I
Mm,
didn't get
Yeah,
to really put all that stuff together and, work with everything I learned in OChem 1. But um, yeah, if I could take it again, I probably would. That'd be really cool. So about 2 years of being a lab IA, and you got into it for OChem 1. Uh,
mm,
what, what made you decide you wanted to be an IA? Why OChem 1? Uh, how did that kind of manifest?
hmm. It's a good question. I don't really remember. I think I just because I was working full time at that time, like, and I think I just kind of wanted a second job. And I figured it wouldn't be too much, like too hard. I could incorporate it into like my class schedule and my work schedule because it would be a very like rigid thing, like Tuesday from 8 to 11 type of thing. Um, I had for at least for OCHM 1, I had a really good IA first time I took it. Um, and so I don't know. I think it's good whenever you get like a really good IA to want to like pass that on and like become an IA yourself and be like a good IA. And I always tell my kids like at the end of the semester, like, hey, like, we're always hiring. If you want to teach, like, here's the link or whatever. And I've had like several of my kids become IAs in like subsequent semesters.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think I do like a decent job and like inspiring people to want to teach as well. Um, but I think that's what it was. I think I had a really good OCHM 1 IA, and it made me kind of want to um, like share that experience with other people. And it's I figured it'll look good on a resume. You're gonna have to teach eventually, so might as well start now. And then as far as OCHM, I just really really enjoyed OCHM 1 and OCHM 2 when I took it, and that's what my research is in organic chemistry. So I figured I don't really want to teach the Gen Chem students. I'd rather kind of stick to like organic.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
What class were you like currently in when you started your job as an IA? Were you like in OChem 2 teaching the OChem 1 lab?
Um, I was so it's actually kind of a funny story. That semester that I had like the really good OChem 1 IA, I actually failed that class
Oh.
like that semester. So, because back then it was if you were absent 3 times, like if you missed
Mm.
3 labs, then you fail the class, like regardless of what your grade is at the time. And I had it at like 8 a.m. on a Friday, and so I missed like a couple times, and then I eventually failed like towards the end of the semester. I was like, well, darn, and I emailed my guys like, hey man, like you were awesome or whatever, but like I missed too many times, so like when do I like check out of my stuff or whatever? But so it kind of like set me back a semester as far as like when I was normally taking my classes. So I was so let's see, I took OChem 1 and OChem 1 lab and lecture together, and I failed the lab. And then the next semester I took OChem 2 and I retook OChem 1. That was in the spring. And then over the summer I took OChem 2 lab in the summer, and then that very next fall I started teaching OChem 1. But by then I was already in PChem.
Oh,
I
okay.
was already out. I was already out of the OChem lab or lectures.
Mm. I kind of I kind of asked just because like as someone who has considered being a lab IA, uh, it, I kind of consider like if I want to go into the OChem 1 lab, when's a good time? Like when would I be like ready? I mean, I think everyone kind of asks themselves like, do I understand this enough to teach it to other people? Like, I guess you being in PChem, you kind of felt much more comfortable, especially having taken it like 1.5 times, sort of.
Mhm.
You were definitely. Were you in research at the time too, with in the Hudnall lab?
Not when I first started. That semester, I started teaching, and then at the end of that semester, probably like right around November, I started researching.
Oh, okay,
So
cool,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. But
I wanted to ask a quick question. So I myself also considered being a lab IA, but one of the things that always crossed my mind before applying was um, basically being in like in a lab setting, you with your lab students, and then someone asks you a question and you don't know. Like
mhm.
you just kind of like, because I remember like when I was taking OChem 1 and OChem 2, I would ask a question, and sometimes my eye would be like, honestly, I don't know. And then I was like, what if that was me in that situation? Like, I honestly probably wouldn't know what to do. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, that happens to me. Like, it hasn't happened so much this semester. It's really nice to be able to get like a couple chem majors to teach because most people are bio or biochem. But every now and then I'll get like a chem major or two. They always ask like unrelated questions, if that makes sense, like just questions like that just come into their brain. Um, and sometimes I don't know. I always have my laptop open because like I'll kind of get them going and then like complete an assignment or two. Um, and so sometimes it's just something I can like Google if I don't know. Um, but sometimes it's like really like a question like no one's ever asked, like no one's cared to like put on like a forum and have people answer it. Um, like I remember, and it's always nice like when someone asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, because like you just it's a little bit like I guess like awkward or embarrassing when you're just like, oh, like I don't know. But um it's kind of cool, like then you go through that process of figuring it out. Like one of my students asked me, this was like when I taught OChem 1, so it was like over a year ago. She asked me like why we use acetone to like clean up the water in like the glassware, which like is a simple enough like question, and I feel like I should have known why, but like actually like why it works and like how it happens, I was like, I don't really know. Like I would assume like the water kind of just like dissolves the ethanol, like if that makes sense. She's like, yeah, kind of. And I was like, but I really like I'm not sure. And so I ended up like looking it up, and that's kind of like what it is. Like they're just miscible in each other. But yeah, it was cool like having to go through that process of like learning something you would have never really thought to like think about. And just the other day, actually, one of my students, she was like, hey, like I had a shower thought the other day. Like I was taking a shower and I was like, why is water a liquid if it's made out of like two gases, hydrogen and oxygen? I was like, that's a really like really interesting question. I was like, I don't really know. I don't really know quite why. And like I still haven't like I just told her like probably because on Earth it's like you have the pressure and the temperature to where like
Yeah.
water is a liquid, but like that's not really like why. Like I don't know. Like um I just gave her kind of like that like short answer, but I was gonna kind of like look into it, but it's kind of hard to I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just like take it as a given, that
Yeah.
that water is just liquid. But
I was gonna say I don't think I've ever heard that question
yeah,
been asked.
But those questions are fun, right? Because like
mhm,
that one shows that the student's comfortable with you and they're kind of willing to have fun with what they're learning and like go outside of what they're supposed to be doing in the lab.
mhm,
And I remember because I've had plenty of these experiences as well, and Edgar has too through like SI and tutoring. I think it was one day I had a student in my SI class come for tutoring, and she was asking me some questions, and I mean she's very bright, so she was asking really good questions and really putting me on the spot, and that's where it's really interesting to see how much more you learn through teaching because you're like,
mhm,
I wasn't thinking about that. That's a great question, and you have to kind of apply yourself
mhm.
on the spot. So I really like those moments, but I think it's almost most intimidating as an IA because there's like a group of people and there's like
Mhm.
all possibilities of questions like that, and it could be kind of contagious. Sometimes that shower thought question comes out, and it's like, wait, but what about this? And
Yeah.
maybe you lose control of the class a little bit. But well, so that's another thing I actually kind of wanted to talk about a little bit was as an IA, you have to lead the class, the lab. You have to teach and you have to kind of control and make sure that everyone's moving at a good pace. No one stays for, 3.5 hours if they don't have to. How has being an IA helped in your leadership and communication skills?
I would say it's definitely helped them quite a bit.
Mm.
And I've seen quite the like growth, I guess, in myself in both of those kind of aspects. Because I've always been like kind of a pretty like reserved person, and I didn't really like speaking in front of people. And I guess I wasn't really thinking about that whenever I applied to be an IA. But like I mean, I knew that about myself, but the very first semester I was teaching in the very first lab, I was like super nervous, and it was kind of a rough one. But I was teaching three labs that semester, and so that was the Monday lab. It was very like awkward. I didn't really know what to say, and I was really nervous. And then I had a Wednesday lab and a Friday lab. And by the time I got to the Friday lab, I kind of knew, what was going on, what they needed to know. I was able to like effectively communicate to them, like, all the important parts. So it's definitely just within like each lab setting, it's definitely like a kind of learning process for yourself. Not just in terms of like the chemistry, just being able to be in a group and like lead them and kind of like, tell them what to do. Because I was never really in that role. I was always kind of, being told what to do, like going through school. You have your teachers that are just kind of like, this is this, and like learn this, write this down or whatever. Um, it was kind of a unique, like novel experience to be that teacher role. Um, and every week, starting over on that Monday lab, it's a new lab and I don't know what to say yet. And so every week, the Monday lab was always a little bit rough. I got over that nervousness and that scared, like, feeling of like having to talk in front of people. Um, and I think especially like getting to know them, because I was really nervous because it was like eight strangers. But like after you kind of get to talk to them and stuff, and then you see them the following week, you're like, okay, yeah, like I know you guys now. It was still like some hiccups, like I still like didn't know everything that was going on, but I was able to kind of like work through it a little bit easier. And then by the time we got to the Friday lab, like it was smooth sailing. Um, so yeah, I think, and especially now, like that was my first semester, and I wasn't probably super great at communicating really everything that they needed to know. I think I've gotten a lot better because I used to like really over explain everything, um, to the point to where it was probably like detrimental to what they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be learning. Like in the NMR and IR lab, I used to like explain like what was happening in the NMR, like how the magnets were working in the NMR, and like how it was affecting like the hydrogens and stuff. And like no one really, you don't need to know that to do the lab. You know, you just have to learn how to like read the spectra. And so that's kind of what I go over now. But yeah, I've just kind of been able to kind of figure out like what the important parts are, what they need to hear, and how to best kind of like deliver those messages. Um, and then of course like the whole transition to online learning, it's a challenge, like making sure that everyone is on the same page and that like they come to the Zoom lectures or whatever. So there's that aspect of like communicating to them like, hey guys, like I always like I feel like I'm the only IA that uses the announcements like tab in Canvas. And I send them like 2 a week. Like
Mm.
I'm always saying like, hey guys, like remember this, like don't forget to like your report's due on Sunday, just stuff like that. I try to keep up a constant stream of communication, and I give them all like my email and my cell phone number just so that if it's something quick, they can just like shoot me a text. And a lot of them do. So I've been called crazy for that. That like,
I used to think that too. I used to think like, oh, why would you ever give your number out to people? But I think especially now more than ever, it's really important to kind of uphold that communication and that norm of like, yeah, please talk to me, because there's so many classes and so many students that are just like, I mean, one of my labs, I won't say which, but I don't know my lab IA's name because I never talked to her, and like, I mean, I just get like this very like generic announcement once a week that just kind of like it's a mess. And well, my point here is like communication is really important in order for the students to know what's going on. And it's not like you're trying to be a helicopter IA or anything. You're just it's important, and you want students to be comfortable in the lab and comfortable asking for help. Um, and I'm sure you have more to say on that, but in general, I think like that's how you prevent big mistakes. That's how you prevent people turning things in late or doing things completely wrong. And I just think this semester we all really have to help each other out a little bit more than in the past.
yeah, definitely. It's also kind of there's another like kind of added layer to the need to like really be able to effectively communicate this semester at least, because and it's kind of unrelated to the whole like pandemic situation that we're in. It's for the OCHEM 2 and OCHEM 1 labs. We lost Dr. Dorsey not too long ago, and so we have a whole new lab coordinator, and he's kind of like restructuring everything. And since I was like the senior most like OCHEM 2 lab IA, I worked with him a lot, on like what the labs are, like how to, like just everything about kind of each lab. So it really helped me get like a really deeper understanding for each of the labs. So it probably like really like improved my uh, like teaching quality for each lab because I know so much about them and like the things that can go wrong. Because normally if a student messes something up, you're like, okay, like now I know that's something that could happen. I'll tell my other students like, hey, don't do this. But actually being able to run through the experiments again, like in kind of like a outside of like a classroom setting, we would just come in and run the reaction. It definitely helped kind of learn like kind of the intricacies of the reaction. But as far as the communication aspect goes, he uh, he likes to kind of like move things around and kind of do his own kind of thing, and it's always it can be a bit confusing for everyone, and it's a bit confusing for me. But we have our like weekly meetings with the IAs and with Dr. Stogie, and we discuss kind of like what's new, like how like what is expected, stuff like that. And then so now it's like the IA's job to then take that that message from higher up and distribute it like lower down. So it's not a like purely leadership like communicating role. It's also like kind of like you're the messenger between the lab coordinator and all of the lab students, um, which I assume is a pretty similar. I've never SI'd, but I assume it's pretty similar kind of situation. There's the lecturer and then all of the students, and you're kind of there as that like intermediary in a sense. That's a lot of what lab IAing is. Um, kind of like making sure that what the lab coordinator wants, all the students know. And then it's, keeping them safe and kind of doing your little pre-lab lecture, and then helping them if they don't understand a procedure step. But really that's a big part of it, is just making sure that what the lab coordinator wants to have happen, that's like communicated effectively to the students.
Cool.
I wanted to, I guess, like just mention something, and it's a little bit like back on the conversation when you were mentioning how you were explaining how the NMR actually works inside to the students and stuff like that. It kind of resonated with me because sometimes what I do is I try to explain to my students really more than they need to know. But the only reason I do that is because I find it cool. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm hoping that they find it cool as well. But I came to the realization that there are some students who are interested in, what's going on, and there are other students who, they're just taking the class because they need to take the class, which is again okay, like not discouraging anybody. But I think making that difference between, okay, they need to know this information versus I'm just related this information because I find it cool and I hope that you find it cool. I think sometimes can be a little bit hard because I mean I'm a chem major, so I find any type of chemistry really cool. So I guess sometimes when I'm like doing my essay sessions and stuff like that, I kind of figure, would they find this cool? Would they not? Should I even spend time mentioning this? I don't know. I just kind of like you said that, and I was like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that was hard for me at first, because I also find everything cool, and I think like, why wouldn't this be cool to other people? But I kind of noticed that as I was explaining some things that were kind of related, but kind of a little bit more um, like advanced, that a lot of people were kind of tuning out, um, especially in the classes that it's like I don't have a single chem major and it's like all biology or all biochem. None of them really like super care about like how the NMR works. But I've had some kids like come up and ask me like, "Hey, like, could you go in like more depth about this?" And we're like, "Yes."
It's cool. So, for somebody like considering the job of an IA, what are some what are some recommendations you'd make for them to like consider before they, actually apply? What are some things they should have in mind when thinking about working as an IA?
I would say whichever lab you're trying to teach, make sure that you really know that lab, um, and obviously like you'll come to know it more like after teaching it. But it's really important to know what the lab is and like what they're doing, like on a wide scale. Like how I said, OCHEM 1 is kind of teaching you how to do things, and then OCHEM 2 is use these things to do chemistry. It's kind of like that. You need to know like Gen Chem 1 is like, this. I don't really remember my Gen Chem labs, but it's good to kind of know like on a wide scale like what your lab itself is, and then on the micro scale like what each lab like for each week is that you're teaching. You know that's kind of a really important thing, I would say. um, but as far as like someone that's first coming in to be an IA, um, I don't know, just I would say kind of you have to learn how to just kind of roll with the punches. It's definitely a new experience for a lot of people that have never like had a teaching role. And it's definitely a big time commitment. You have your 3-hour lab every week. If you're only teaching one, most people teach two, or some people teach three. Um, 3 labs is a lot though, and that's what I did my very first semester, and I haven't done it since, just because it was such a constant like time commitment. So that was really hard for me my first semester IAing, and I really wouldn't recommend that to anyone for their first semester at least. And that's really just down to like the grading. Uh, I'm pretty sure the grading for like the Gen Chem labs isn't that grueling, but reading like 16 lab reports per section You know, and you have 3 sections, that's like almost 50 reports, and that's every week. So on top of your 50
Jeez.
quizzes. So it's just kind of like you have to be cognizant of your um, like how much time is really appropriate to put into this, which is like not to like, you know, kind of like downgrade it, but it is just kind of like a part-time job. You know, it's like no one like, you know, wants to grow up and be an OChem 2 IA. Like it's just kind of like a filler job. It looks good on your resume, but you know, it is a temporary thing at the end of the day. So you want to be like cognizant of how really important it is to you at the time, because I'm guilty of it. Like I'll grade instead of doing like homework, because like I need to get this grade in by Sunday or something. But then I'll have like, you know, an assignment due on Monday, and I'm kind of screwed, like strapped for time. So you do need to kind of be aware that it is a time commitment, and that really like your schoolwork will come first. Like it needs to come first. Like as well as like, you know, other things in your life. I have a friend who he's a Gen Chem 2 IA, I believe, and we're always like, hey, like, you know, come hang out or whatever, and he's like, can't, I'm grading. Like all the time, he's always grading. So it's kind of that too. It's not just like your schoolwork comes first, but sometimes like it can be like somewhat of a drain on your social life, especially like when I was teaching the three courses, the three like different sections. um I remember like it was really hard to find time to like do other things other than school and work, like to just go like, you know, be a part of a club or something. um so really I think that would be the biggest thing I would say to someone that's like wants to be a new IA, is just be aware of like the time commitment of it and be able to properly schedule yourself, and um, you know, just budget your time wisely.
So let me get this straight. Three lab sections, and you were doing physical chemistry
Yeah.
in the same semester?
Yeah,
My
and quant.
gosh.
I think I was in quant at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, and like and E&M or mechanics, one of the two. Yeah. Yeah, that was a really fun semester. Learned a lot. It was really busy.
Well, I'm sure it set you up for really knowing how to manage your time, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that to myself. That sounds crazy. Um, wow. So we were talking about your research a little bit, the Ludlow group. How did being an IA kind of like help you get in there, or like when you were in the lab, you know, how in what ways did being an IA kind of make you a more efficient, you know, student in the lab, or how did it help?